It's amazing to be here in this space with your phenomenal works. Can you tell us a little bit more about what inspired them?
Well, I guess as I was making them, I started to realize as I was sort of cutting back into the surface and getting halfway through the painting themselves, they started to resemble aerial views of landscape. And I've worked a little bit like that in the past in my painting practice. And so I really wanted to harness that and go all in on, I guess, creating works that alluded to an aerial view of an imagined landscape, but ultimately were paintings and interesting textured paintings.
Yeah, and where might you have seen aerial views before? I know you have some experience with that.
Yeah, for sure. I've got experience with seeing the landscape from above, from flying domestically, but also closer to the landscape and flying in small Cessnas around 20 years ago with my grandma. And I think a lot of my early influence and interest in painting came from the aerial view of the Australian landscape. So it's nice to be able to connect to, I guess, 20 years ago when I started painting to now these new works.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
And they're so highly textured, there's so much going on with them. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about how you've made them, some of the processes and materials that are involved?
Sure. Yes, well, I guess through the first wave in the pandemic, I kind of was working on some works separate to these, which were building up texture with perlite. And they were, these works came after that. And different to those works, I started cutting back and scratching into the surface of these. And so there's almost an erosion of the landscape in these particular works. And in that, in those areas where the material has been sort of sanded back, that's where I've really explored allowing pigment to move across the whole surface through water. They were painted on the horizontal platform in my studio with a slight angle. And so there's sort of like a runoff, and a lot of the pigment catches on areas of the textured surface, similar to the way things sort of catch in the landscape when heavy rains come along. So there's, I guess, a connection to the landscape through that textural painting.
Yeah, beautiful. And they really change, their appearance changes as you move around them. Can you maybe say how you'd like people to experience the works?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I wanted to really reward the viewer, as I've said a few times, reward the gallery visitor and people that are coming in. When you walk around these works, you see the pigments change and you see iridescence sort of pop up and then all of a sudden, I guess, disappear. Similar to when you might fly across the landscape and you see sun hitting the water in a particular area, and then moments later that's gone. And I feel like as you're walking around these works, which are installed centrally in the gallery for that very reason, you are almost sort of surveying the works and flying around them in a way. Yeah, I also painted right on the top of the surface with a brush with iridescent silver to kind of really, I guess, exaggerate the texture. But all in all, I guess, it was a really good experiment for me to be able to kind of work in different ways that I normally would not in the studio.